La Reine, Marie Antoinette. Was she a victim or a villain? That's one of those questions that gets passed around so much in history. There's not really an exact answer. During this history talk, in no way will I condone what she did. She was a child bride, a pawn in a system of government used to promote peace. She was also a shopaholic and a gambler. We can't ignore her faults. At a tender age, she was promised in marriage to Louis Auguste, a boy who was just as inexperienced and clueless as she was. The narrative blames her for the downfall of France, but is that true? In this series, I'm not going to condone or condemn. I'm just going to show you how she went from one of the most powerful women in the world, one of the most hated women in France. We're talking the one and only Marie Antoinette, right here on History Talk. Maria Antonia Josepha, I don't know, Joanna, John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith, was born November 2nd, 1775, in Vienna, Austria, in what was then part of the Holy Roman Empire. If she had been a contemporary of William Shakespeare, I think he would have had a field day writing her life story. The day she was born, there was a massive earthquake in Lisbon, Portugal. One of the worst catastrophes ever. Marie was one of several children belonging to Empress Maria Theresa and her father, Emperor Francis I. The family had plenty of boys, so they didn't really have to worry so much about divvying up responsibility within their empire itself. And as you know, in history, women are often just pawns, trading goods, a way to establish alliances through marriage. Eventually, she would be promised to Louis Auguste of France. One of my favorite moments in one of my high school history classes was when a student said, "So what exactly is the Holy Roman Empire?" To which my teacher said, "I don't think anybody really knows." That she just never answered it. It's a complicated shaping of countries after multiple wars in Europe. It's exhausting, and I don't have the strength to explain it past that. So I understand my high school teacher completely. Francis ruled that. All of that. And as such, and it was decided that his daughter, Maria Antonia, would be given as a gift, basically, to France, as a bride for Louis Auguste, solidifying the relationship between the Holy Roman Empire and France. She was 14 years old when they got married. Now let's take a second to focus on Louis Auguste, a boy who should have never been king. And there are several reasons as to why that is, not just the fact that he was not good at his job. Louis was actually the grandson of the current king. His older brother was actually supposed to be king, but he died at the age of 9. Then his father died, and then his mother died. Yes, both parents died of tuberculosis, and my poor man here was not prepared to be king at all. Nobody really paid much attention to him because nobody thought he was going to be of any significance, and now he was heir to the throne of France. He was well educated and in good health, and apparently a very pleasant person according to all reports. He did have some strange interest. He enjoyed wrestling. He loved animals. But the strangest hobby by far he had was that he loved locks and keys. A man should have been a locksmith, not king of France. Marie had known since she was 12 years old that she was going to be married to Louis Auguste. There were other sisters ahead of her, but some of them had died, so homegirl was up at the plate. She traveled in a caravan across Europe to France, and at the border of the country was stripped naked of all her Austrian clothes and put into French clothes because, well, now she was French. She spoke the language, but she did speak it with an Austrian accent, which was often mocked at court. Girl, I know the feeling. Kentucky Fried French. When she finally arrived, Louis's grandfather announced that she was a beauty, and everybody thought she was just stunning. Blonde hair, which you can't really tell from the gray powder on the wig, but whatever. Pale skin, good figure. And at the ages of 14 and 15, they were married in a lavish ceremony inside the chapel of Versailles. But here's a small problem. Louis either had some sort of dysfunction or just didn't want to consummate the marriage. That's a problem. Imagine being a woman in a position whose sole purpose was to give birth, to have children, so an empire can continue. To the point that you have people checking your bed sheets daily to see if stuff had happened. Stuff didn't happen. And as such, she became the focus of a lot of attacks. She was literally jeered at, booed for not having children when it wasn't actually her fault. It's dangerous as historians to speculate on people's proclivities for certain things, but Marie got all the blame. Her mother wrote her letters, scolding her, saying she needed to be sweeter to seduce her husband. It took 7 years. Marie's family sent her elder brother, Joseph, to get the lowdown from Marie, who explained, well, it just doesn't work. Joseph finally talks to Louis, explains things. Finally, the marriage gets consummated. The birds and the bees talk from Marie's brother seemed to work. They even sent him a thank you note, which is just... why is that so funny? Thanks for telling us how that works, big bro. Appreciate it. Her first child was a girl, much to the disappointment of the court. I hate it when patriarchy. But she did give birth to others, including the Dauphin, her son Louis. And though she continued to be mocked at court for not having kids, when she finally did have children, people at court started rumors that they were illegitimate. Results of affairs. It was never proven, and it's just another... why would... that's what you wanted. You got what you wanted. Why do you still dislike this woman? I'll get more into her children a little later, but let's talk about her role at court. She's portrayed in history as just kind of a powder puff, a pretty ornament walking around Versailles, but she actually tried to advocate a lot for her home country. Most of the time, Louis just ignored her advice. Now the press was starting to hate her. As I said in the beginning, I was not going to condemn nor condone anything about Marie. Marie had a ton of faults. Mainly, she liked to spend money. I kind of get it, but also, read the room. France had been struggling for a very, very, very long time. There were grain shortages, wars, and people like Thomas Jefferson and others were begging for money for the American Revolution. So while I appreciate it, we also helped contribute to this a bit. Sorry. In his writings when he was the ambassador to France, Thomas Jefferson noted that while she was cute, the girl had a gambling addiction, loved to spend money, loved clothes, shoes, and he kind of implied she was a little bit of a bimbo. Now, she did have several charitable organizations, but she was a shopaholic. And when people are starving, and you're living like this, you're going to get targeted. But why she was the main target, I'll never understand, because most of the money was being spent by him. I've done a series on the French Revolution. I cannot recap it in one 60-second video. Basically, people are hungry. Poor people are being taxed. And the clergy and the royalty are having a high old time. I don't really think that Louis understood the seriousness of the situation. My favorite was when he decided to lock the third estate of the National Assembly out. And they were like, okay, you lock us out of that room. We're just going to go over here to this tennis court. And Louis started to kind of acquiesce to the demands, but the damage had been done. France was bankrupt. People were convinced that they were hoarding bread at Versailles. So on October 5th, 1789, it wasn't just women, they led the charge, but and this erupts into total chaos. The National Guard attempted to guard Versailles from the angry mob. And guess who the head of the National Guard was? America's favorite fighting Frenchman, Lafayette. I'm not gonna rap it, I promise. He was an aristocrat, and he favored revolution, obviously, but he realized his guardsmen were on the sides of the revolutionaries. What happens next is chaos. I don't know, man. I'm kind of wanting to start a history talk, conspiracy theory about Lafayette, because this man was, at every major historical event in a certain time period. At the end of the day, he went against everyone and tried to protect the king, which kind of earned him a traitor title. It's not that he didn't want a revolution, he just didn't want to kill the king. The palace was eventually breached because some genius just did not guard a gate. And while that's funny, what happens inside is not. The guards inside ran to warn Marie Antoinette that the crowds had breached the palace. One of her guardsmen was killed, but they managed to get her out a secret passage, which I think I showed you in an earlier video a couple weeks ago. But it was Lafayette who calmed the crowd. He got the king and queen to address them, which actually did help a bit. Versailles is about 20 to 30 minutes outside of Paris by train now, and the mob wanted them back in Paris. So they were escorted back to where they would meet their eventual fate. A lot of horrible things can be said about Marie Antoinette, but she was, above all, actually a wonderful mother. She gave birth to 4 children, 2 of whom survived to be alive for this entire mess that was going on. Her 3rd child was often rumored to be the child of somebody else, one of her lovers. That's never been proven. But it's no wonder that people believe such salacious things about Marie Antoinette because, well, the press ran with it. I've talked about these things before. Pamphlets called libelles, kind of like libel. They lampooned her as a harlot. I don't know what kind of language TikTok doesn't like on here, so I'm just going to go with harlot. Good old-fashioned harlot. The family tried to escape back to Austria. They disguised themselves in servant clothing, but were quickly caught. Rumors circulated that her brother was trying to organize troops to save their lives, but that just made people more angry. She was now a traitor, and the family was jailed at Le Conciergerie in Paris. There are a lot of complicated details about the movements of where they were taken to after they were caught trying to escape. It would take me a while to explain where that was. Eventually, Marie ends up in La Conciergerie, but she was in a couple other places prior to this. The Jacobins began decapitating royalty and aristocrats. The head of one of Marie's best friends was styled with makeup and hair and paraded around so that she could see it. She was initially allowed to stay with her children, but they were eventually separated. But she did hear her children being tortured at some point. This is your trigger warning. Louis Charles was forced to testify that his mother had assaulted him in a way that I probably can't say on this app without being censored, but I think you get the idea. There are rumors that he was incredibly physically abused and malnourished. Her teenage daughter, Marie-Thérèse, is also rumored to have suffered some very brutal treatment from men that I do not want to say, also a trigger warning. Marie was tried for treason and found guilty. The room where Marie was held in the Conciergerie is basically now a chapel. But then it was a place a little comfort, a cot. The warden was kind enough to give her a pillow, which was a luxury there. And they gave her some powder for her face, just to be kind, I think. But the queen was beaten. She was emotionally beaten. She was under surveillance day and night. She was never given new clothes, but they did thankfully give her some bonnets. Just once again, thanks! My clothes are falling apart, but thanks for the hat. There was a plot to break her out, but it was quickly discovered. It's called the Carnation Affair. I won't have time to get into it. Her husband was decapitated on January 21st, 1793. Marie was sentenced to die in October. She managed to write a letter to her sister-in-law before her death. What hits me the most from that letter is she says, "I grieve bitterly leaving my poor children." Louis Charles would die 2 years later. She walked calmly to her death, accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot. Her last words, "Pardonnez-moi, monsieur, je ne l'ai pas fait exprès." Forgive me, I didn't do it on purpose. If the goal of Maximilien Robespierre was to wipe out the entire Bourbon family, he failed. Yes, he took out the figurehead for sure, and the next heir. What he did not count on was the strength of a teenage girl. If there is any silver lining in what happened to this family, it is that Marie-Thérèse was too strong. It is well documented that Robespierre kept what happened to her family from her. She was eventually told and was heartbroken, of course, but there is one mystery in history that I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for. Robespierre visited her while she was being held prisoner, and they talked. Don't know how long exactly, but for a while. No one knows what was said. His aim to take out the royal family of France stopped with her. She was a survivor. When the empire came around, she found herself just too distrustful of everyone in France, and she would leave. Don't blame her at all. Napoleon Bonaparte once said of her, he was the only man in her family. As big of a fan as I am of the subject of the French Revolution, I still can't quite work out the good that it did in the immediate time period. Because we know it led to chaos. We also know from series of women over history, Cleopatra, Catherine the Great, that people will attack a woman who is in power by accusing her of a great many things. That said, not innocent. I think she was in a system where she was just bound to be naive. Educated, sure, but educated in what? Music? Sewing? No. And like I said, it's not for me to condemn or judge. She already has been judged, and history has judged her more harshly, sometimes I feel, than her husband. And I look at how Thomas Jefferson mocked them both when they are the reason America won the revolution. History's never cut and dry. That's why I like it. And you can have your opinions on her. She was no angel. But I also think her death helped nothing. Thanks for watching.